The next time you walk through a park, prune a rosebush, or even just bite into a crisp salad, you might want to pause for a second and consider what is actually happening on a cellular level. For centuries, we have treated plants like biological furniture, silent, unfeeling backdrop pieces to the high-drama lives of animals and humans. We assumed that because they don't have a brain, a central nervous system, or a face to scream with, they simply don't experience the world in any meaningful way. But groundbreaking recent research has just shattered that illusion. Scientists have officially confirmed that plants can hear the world around them. They can feel the slightest touch, and most incredibly, they react to physical damage with a chemical and electrical surge that looks hauntingly similar to the way our own bodies react to pain. This isn't some fringe New Age theory. This is hard science, backed by high-speed cameras, bioluminescent imaging, and ultra-sensitive microphones that have captured the secret. Frantic conversations happening in the soil beneath your feet. Imagine being rooted to one spot, unable to run, unable to hide, while a predator slowly begins to eat you alive. If you were a plant, how would you survive? Evolution has provided an answer that is far more sophisticated than anything we ever imagined. It turns out that plants are not passive victims. They are hyper-aware, highly communicative organisms that are constantly monitoring their environment for threats. When a caterpillar takes its first bite out of a leaf, the plant doesn't just sit there. Within seconds, an electrical signal races from the site of the injury to the rest of the plant, triggering a massive defensive response. It's a systemic warning system that essentially screams to every other leaf, "We are under attack. Batten down the hatches." To understand how deep this goes, we have to look at the work done by researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Tel Aviv University. They used a specific type of genetic modification that allowed plants to glow whenever calcium levels surged in their cells. In the animal kingdom, calcium ions are a primary way that signals travel through the nervous system. When these scientists snipped a leaf with scissors or allowed a caterpillar to munch on a sprout, they watched in awe as a wave of neon green light washed over the plant. This wave traveled at about 1 millimeter per second. While that sounds slow to us, in the world of biology, it's a lightning-fast communication network. The plant was effectively feeling the wound and instantly alerting its entire system to begin producing toxins and repellent chemicals to make itself taste bad to the attacker. But the story gets even more mind-blowing when we talk about hearing. Most people think hearing requires ears and a brain to process sound waves. But think about what sound actually is. It's just vibrations moving through the air. Tel Aviv University researchers conducted an experiment where they played the recorded sound of a buzzing bee to a group of flowers. Within 3 minutes of hearing the bee, the plants increased the sugar concentration in their nectar by 20%. They weren't just reacting to a random noise. They recognized the specific frequency of a pollinator and decided to invest energy into making their nectar sweeter to attract the bee. When they played white noise or a different frequency, they were literally listening for friends and ignoring the background static. On the flip side, plants also listen for enemies. There is a study involving a plant called Arabidopsis, which is commonly used in labs. Researchers played a recording of the specific crunching sound a caterpillar makes when it eats a leaf. The plants that heard the crunching sound immediately began flooding their leaves with mustard oils and other chemical defenses, even though no caterpillar was actually touching them. They were preparing for a battle they heard coming from a distance. Effectively, the plant was eavesdropping on its own potential destruction and taking preemptive action. This level of situational awareness is something we usually only attribute to complex animals with brains. Now let's address the most controversial part of this discovery: the reaction to pain. In the human body, pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Because plants don't have emotions in the way we do, scientists are careful about using the word pain. However, from a purely physiological standpoint, the reaction is almost identical. When a plant is wounded, it releases a substance called glutamate. If that sounds familiar, it's because glutamate is the most common neurotransmitter in the human brain. It's the same chemical that helps us send signals from our limbs to our brain when we get hurt. When the plant releases glutamate, it triggers that calcium wave we talked about earlier, leading to a state of systemic stress and defense. The plant is essentially saying, "Something is wrong, I am being damaged, and I need to fix it." This brings us to a terrifying realization that has captured the internet's attention recently: the sounds plants make when they are stressed. Researchers used ultrasonic microphones to listen to tomato and tobacco plants that were either dehydrated or had their stems cut. They discovered that when plants are under high stress, they emit clicking sounds that are completely inaudible to human ears but are as loud as a normal human conversation to other animals. These clicks aren't just random pops, they are frequent and rhythmic. A healthy, hydrated plant is nearly silent. An injured or thirsty plant sounds like a frantic typewriter. This means that if we had the right ears, a walk through a drought-stricken field would sound like a cacophony of distress calls. These sounds could potentially be heard by insects like moths or even small mammals, who might use the screams of the plant to decide where to lay their eggs or whether or not to eat that specific plant. But wait, it goes even deeper. Plants don't just react to their own experiences, they share them. There is a hidden network beneath the soil that scientists have nicknamed the Wood Wide Web. This is a vast underground grid made of fungal threads called mycelium. This fungus forms a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. In exchange for sugars produced by the plant through photosynthesis, the fungus provides water and minerals. But more importantly, the mycelium acts as a fiber optic cable for chemical data. When one tree in a forest is attacked by a disease or a pest, it sends a chemical warning signal through the fungal network to its neighbors. The neighboring trees receive this email and begin boosting their own immune systems before the pest even reaches them. This isn't just a collection of trees. It's a social community that looks out for its own members. Recent discoveries have also shown that plants have a sense of proprioception, which is the ability to know where your body parts are in space. If you close your eyes and move your hand, you still know exactly where your hand is. Plants do this too. They have specialized cells that contain heavy starch grains that settle at the bottom of the cell due to gravity, telling the plant which way is up. But they also have sensors that detect when they are being bent or pulled by the wind. If you touch a plant repeatedly, it will often grow shorter and thicker to withstand the perceived physical pressure. This is called thigmomorphogenesis. The plant feels the touch, interprets it as a mechanical threat, and changes its entire growth strategy to survive. This level of sophistication forces us to rethink the very nature of intelligence. We are so used to intelligence being a centralized thing, located in a gray lump of tissue in our heads. But plants have a decentralized intelligence. Every leaf, every root tip, and every stem is a sensor that can make decisions. If a root hits a rock, it doesn't wait for instructions from a brain. It senses the obstacle and moves around it. If a leaf is in the shade, it communicates with the rest of the plant to reallocate resources to the leaves that are in the sun. It's a distributed network of intelligence that has allowed plants to dominate the planet for hundreds of millions of years. Imagine the implications for our food industry and agriculture. If plants can hear and feel, are we causing them unnecessary stress through our industrial farming methods? Scientists are now looking at how to use these discoveries to create happier and more productive crops. Instead of using harsh pesticides, what if we could play a specific sound frequency that triggers a plant's natural immune system? What if we could talk to our crops through chemical signals, telling them to prepare for an incoming drought or a specific pest? This could revolutionize how we grow food, making it more sustainable and less reliant on chemicals. But there is also an ethical side to this. For a long time, the distinction between animals and plants was clear. Animals feel, plants grow. But as that line continues to blur, it raises some uncomfortable questions. If a plant can express distress through ultrasonic clicks and chemical signals, does that change our relationship with them? Of course, we have to eat, and plants don't have a conscious ego or a sense of self in the way we do. But recognizing their complexity is a step toward a much more respectful and integrated view of the natural world. It moves us away from being masters of a silent world and toward being members of a loud, vibrant, and feeling ecosystem. Let's look at the shame plant, or Mimosa pudica, as a perfect example of plant feelings. If you touch its leaves, they fold up instantly. For a long time, we thought this was just a simple reflex, like a spring. But researchers have found that this plant actually has a memory. They conducted an experiment where they dropped the plant a short distance onto a soft pad multiple times. At first, the plant folded its leaves in a panic every time it was dropped. But after a few dozen drops, the plant realized that being dropped onto this specific pad didn't cause any actual damage. It stopped folding its leaves. Even more incredible, when researchers tested the plant weeks later, it still remembered that the drop was harmless. It had learned what to fear and what to ignore. It had a long-term memory, despite having no brain. This leads us to the concept of plant vision. While they don't have eyes with lenses and retinas, they are covered in photoreceptors that allow them to see light in ways we can't even dream of. They can detect the direction of light, the intensity, and the specific color spectrum. More importantly, they can see shadows produced by their neighbors. They can tell when another plant is encroaching on their space by detecting the ratio of red to far red light, which changes as light passes through leaves. When a plant sees a neighbor getting too close, it will either grow faster to get above them or grow in the opposite direction to find more space. They are constantly navigating a visual world that is far more detailed than we ever gave them credit for. Even the way they handle their circadian rhythm is complex. Just like humans, plants have an internal clock that tells them when it's day and when it's night. They prepare for the sunrise before it even happens, moving their leaves into position to catch the first rays of light. At night, they rest, changing their metabolic processes to focus on growth and repair. If you disrupt this clock by keeping the lights on 24 hours a day, the plant becomes stressed, its immune system weakens, and its growth slows down. They need their sleep just as much as we do, and they experience jet lag if you move them to a different time zone. The discovery that plants react to pain and stress using the same chemical pathways as humans, specifically the glutamate and calcium signaling, is perhaps the most humbling discovery in modern biology. It suggests that the tools for feeling the world were developed very early in the history of life on Earth, before the ancestors of plants and animals went their separate ways. It's a shared heritage that connects us to every tree in the forest and every blade of grass in our yards. We are built from the same basic code, using the same basic signals to navigate a world that can be harsh and unforgiving. As we continue to develop even more sensitive technology, the secrets of the plant world will only become more amazing. We are currently developing electronic plants that can interface with computers, allowing us to monitor their chemical signals in real time. Imagine an app on your phone that alerts you when your houseplant is feeling thirsty or stressed before the leaves even start to wilt. We would be able to hear the silent whispers of our greenery and respond to their needs with precision. This isn't just about agriculture. It's about a total shift in our perception of life itself. Consider the Venus flytrap. It's famous for its ability to snap shut on insects, but did you know it can count? Research has shown that the flytrap only closes when its sensitive hairs are touched twice within 20 seconds. This prevents it from closing on raindrops or falling debris. Once the trap is closed, the plant waits for 3 more touches before it begins to produce digestive enzymes. It counts the struggle of the insect to make sure it's worth the energy of digestion. This is a clear example of complex decision-making based on sensory input and memory. The plant is calculating its return on investment before it commits its resources. Even the roots of plants exhibit a form of social behavior. There is evidence that some plants can recognize their own kin. When planted in a pot with individuals of the same species that are genetically related, roots tend to be less aggressive and take up only as much space as they need. When planted with unrelated strangers, the roots become more competitive, growing faster and attempting to crowd out the competition. They have a sense of self and family that influences their physical growth and behavior. So where does this leave us? We are standing at the threshold of a new understanding of the planet. We are moving from a world of it to a world of thou. The forest is no longer just a source of timber or a place for a hike. It's a living, breathing, screaming, and caring community. The evidence is now impossible to ignore. From the clicking sounds of a thirsty tomato to the neon waves of a wounded sprout, the plant world is shouting at us, and we are finally beginning to understand the language. The sheer persistence of life is the greatest story ever told. Whether it's a 300-million-year-old forest buried under ash or a dandelion growing through a crack in the sidewalk, life finds a way to feel, hear, and react. The sophistication of a plant is not a lesser version of our own. It's a different version, one that has been perfected over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. They have survived extinctions, ice ages, and the rise of humans. They have done it all while being rooted to the ground, using their incredible sensitivity and community networks to navigate a changing world. As you go about your life today, try to look at a tree or a houseplant through this new lens. Think about the invisible waves of calcium moving through its stems. Think about its photoreceptors watching the sun. Think about its roots talking to the fungi in the soil. And remember that if you were to cut into it, it would send out an electrical signal as loud and clear as any animal's cry, alerting its neighbors and preparing for a fight. The planet is far more alive than we ever thought, and we are just beginning to learn how to listen. This scientific journey into the hidden lives of plants is a reminder that we should never stop asking questions. We should never assume that because something is different from us, it is simple. The arrogance of assuming that only humans or fancy animals can feel or hear has blinded us for centuries. But the cameras don't lie, the microphones don't lie, and the chemical signatures don't lie. Plants are aware. Plants are sensitive. Plants are, in their own way, brilliant. Staying engaged with these recent scientific discoveries is the only way to truly understand our place in the universe. We aren't the only protagonists on this stage. Every living thing has its own perspective, its own sensory world, and its own story to tell. By unlocking the secrets of plant hearing and feeling, we aren't just learning about biology, we are learning about the very essence of existence. We are learning that the capacity to sense the world and react to it is the fundamental definition of life. So, the next time you smell freshly cut grass, remember what that smell actually is. It's a chemical alarm signal, a green leafy volatile, released by the grass to warn others of an incoming threat and to attract beneficial insects that might help. That pleasant summer smell is actually a frantic, fragrant warning. The world is full of these hidden messages, and now that we know they exist, we can never unknow them. The silence of the plant world has been broken forever. We are living in an age of wonder where the boundaries of our knowledge are expanding faster than ever before. Every day, science pulls back another veil, revealing a world that is more complex, more beautiful, and more interconnected than we could have ever imagined. The secret life of plants is out, and it's a story of resilience, communication, and feeling that deserves our attention and our respect. Keep your eyes on the greenery because it's watching you back, listening to your steps, and talking about you in a language of scent and electricity that we are only just beginning to decode. Stay curious, stay humble, and never underestimate the power of a single green leaf. The evidence is here, and it's time we all start paying attention to the silent voices of our planet.